Hello, lovely writers, and welcome to this week's Writerly Wednesday. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and I went back and watched the old video, and I thought, let's do a new version. Why do we want to talk about books that I recommend? Well, certainly as an agent and a coach, I've worked with hundreds of writers, and not just in viewing how they approach their work, but in mentoring writers through what can sometimes feel like a really complicated process. I've curated some books that I absolutely recommend. And I'll be honest, I also like some of these books just for myself outside of writing. They are a way to move forward in the world so that you are in full ownership of your writerly self. So let's get the writing book recommendations out of the way. Of course, this can always change because there are new books being written, but I found that I've actually kept quite a set of books that I still love and I'm always recommending these particular books. So the first one is by Cron, who has several fabulous books. I would probably recommend any book that she's written, but in this case, I'm going to call out Story Genius. Why? Because so many of the writers that I work with tend to really worry about their technique and things like that. And that's not to say that craft isn't important. However, what Lisa points out in this book is the thing that I'm always talking about, which is it is more about connection with story. Your connection as a writer first with the story, and then therefore how your writers are going to connect with the story. We've all seen it, books that are not what we would consider the best in technique or even the best with grammar or anything. They're breaking all sorts of rules, and you may love it or hate it, but the book does really well. Why? Because the way that they're telling a story appeals directly to their audience. Whether I'm their audience or not is another question, but they don't care because they're selling millions of books. And that's what she talks about in Story Genius. It's really good to get your head around some of those things to release yourself from some of these expectations that you have. Now, the next book I recommend is The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler. It's a thick one, okay? And it's not super new. The reason it's so good for writers is because, number one, it helps break down in practical and relatable examples Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, which is the primary platform in which many stories are told, and it seems to be almost in our DNA as far as how we tell story. It's not the only way to tell story, but The Hero's Journey is really the primary form of transformation that we show in stories. So getting your hands on that book is really good, and also because it demystifies some of those stages in the hero's journey with, as I said, really relatable or at least very popular pop culture examples. So it gives you a way to break it down so that you might understand. But if that's not your go, then I also recommend Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. Now, don't be put off if you're not a screenwriter and you're saying, and why are you recommending a screenwriting book? Because if you're looking at very basic structure and story beats, this one is amazing. It breaks it down. I'm a big proponent of just a little bit of structure and then leave the rest up to your imagination and your creative process to get you through the book. But this is the way that screenwriters look at it. It can be really helpful for novelists as well. The next one, the Incomparable Ann Lamott, Bird by Bird. Always recommend this one. I love her irreverent sense of humor. I just love the way that she's out there with what she thinks, and she doesn't hold anything back, and she is very, very grounded and real. You either like her or maybe don't like her, but if you don't know of her, go check her out. You might find a TED Talk. If you like that, check out this book. It's, again, one that helps you understand as a writer how to tackle long-form writing in particular. There's a whole story behind the title, Bird by Bird. And I just think it's nice to hear from a writer who's in the trenches with you about how she goes through that process. And again, this sense of demystifying things. The final book is, again, an older book, and it's not for everyone, but I love it at least for one particular message. The book itself is On Writing Well by William Zinzer. Now, some of the writers that I work with write, and all the words come out at the beginning, right? And then they work to take it away. Sort of like, I guess, a sculptor may start with this big amorphous form, and then they make the shape out of it. And other people are builders, where they take nothing and they're slowly putting the scaffolding up and they create something out of that. William Zinzer is more, if you throw everything out at first and you're taking away, he has some really great, straightforward, simple, to the point recommendations on how to do it. And as I said, not every writer is going to resonate here, but I think that for those who are throw everything at it, which I absolutely love, those, and if that's you, those are the sorts of writers that can really get a lot from thinking about how do I take away after I've done the throwing everything at it, and how do I do it in a way where I'm not losing the heart of what it is that I want to say. How can I use my words even better, more directed, more intentional, and retain the beauty of this thing that I've created that I want to share with the world, right? So those are the top 5 that are specific to writing. Now, these next ones, I tried to do 5. Boy, I couldn't do it. These are books that it's for creativity and or life. They are the things that I refer to, whether in my mind or as I'm talking with writers and other people, really how I try to approach life, and if ever I need a touch point to get me back to the right place or the place that feels good to me, these are the books that I go back to. So the first is, again, still within that creativity place, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I adore this book. Again, like Ann Lamott's, this is from a writer who's in the trenches with you. She's written both nonfiction and fiction. She gets the creative process as much as we can get it, right? It is magic. And she shares some stories that really may resonate with you and why you feel like you're following the muse, or sometimes the ideas are big and you're full force at them, and other times it's not quite working and you don't understand. It's a book that I think also helps you give yourself grace. Highly recommend this book. The next one is one that's just good for life, and it's The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Really small book. The Four Agreements are short. They are perfect and important for every stage of life. I share this with my teenagers. I would share this with anyone. If you get these 4 agreements right, you're going to feel good. And one of the things that I think is so important is to see that writing isn't separate to life. Writing is part of life. And so you want to feel like you are flowing back and forth between the two. And there's no part of publishing that isn't directly related to the 4 agreements. So get yourself a copy of the 4 agreements if you haven't already gotten it. I always have it really close to hand, generally on that bookshelf up there, or I've got a bookshelf in front of me as well. It's close to hand when I need that reminder. Another book that I really like that I was reminded of as I was running through a challenge this week, and it was E Squared by Pam Grout. There's probably some follow-on books. I believe there are follow-on books like E Cubed. All of them, what's really interesting is that she breaks it up, again, a very approachable sort of writing style, because she's used to freelance writing. I really like that. It's very conversational. But the book itself is all about performing little experiments with yourself. So you don't have to take anything in and say, I believe this wholeheartedly. Experiment. What's it going to hurt? And the one thing that comes up over and over again that I really remember from E Squared is the reticular activating system. It's really about what we're seeing in our lives. So this idea that it isn't for me, or it's not out there, it doesn't exist, and then it exists, right? It's all about perspective. And I love experimenting in real world ways. And this book is great for that. So whether you go for the first one, which was E Squared, or E Cubed, I'm sure that E Cubed is just more experiments that you could run, but maybe start with the first one and see how you go. See if you like her style. And even if you don't love her style, dive in, run some experiments for yourself. Again, it's about opening your mind so that you can continue to approach your creativity and your writing, creating the writerly life that you really want. After that one is another 4 book, The Four Tendencies. Get the book, don't get the book, I don't mind. But Gretchen Rubin has a really great hypothesis here, and the 4 tendencies are all about how you approach life. The goal for this is just to figure out, how do I naturally do things and stop beating myself up for doing things the way that I do things. So finding ways to follow your own tendency so you stop hitting your head up against a brick wall. Again, all about perspective and expectations of yourself. Now, another one that is one that I've loved, again, an older book, but a really beautiful small book that gets me into that feeling state that's like little essays. Gift from the Sea by Ann Marrow Lindbergh. It's just a really beautiful little book, and one that I go back to when I want to get into a certain vibe and I want to appreciate what is around me, right? And sometimes if you're in the muck of it with a manuscript, it's nice to have a place to go to feel good. That's not full distraction, i.e. going and consuming other people's stuff, but still you're right on the edge there, but you just want to feel good. Like, there's a reason for me to be doing this, and I believe in it, and I love it, and gratitude and appreciation. That's what that book is for me. And getting to view somebody else's writing that's maybe different from a lot of the things that we're seeing out there in the bookshops at the moment, and just kind of takes you back a bit. I love that feeling of nostalgia. It is rich with nostalgia. The final book that I'm going to recommend that I have on my bookshelf is actually several books all in one, and it's the writings of Florence Scovel Shinn. I'm not talking about religion or even spirituality or anything like that here, because I actually don't have exactly the same beliefs as this woman, but I really appreciate the way that she gets me to stretch my mind and, again, open myself up to the magic of the natural world. So whether you're a proponent of the law of attraction or not, that's okay. But if you can, dive into some of these ideas, just in so much as finding what may help you unlock something in your writing. Nobody's asking you to change your views on the world, your religious beliefs, or anything like that. But what would it feel like if you could just expand a little? If you could, like with Pam Grout's book, do an experiment to stretch a little. I'm always recommending to my writers to, I had a mentor who calls it play to the edge, and I just say stretch your comfort zone. I want you to put one big toe over the edge of what feels comfortable now. And a lot of the books that I recommend are all about that. Whether they are talking about structure, which feels very pragmatic, very left brain, or something that's more whimsical, like Big Magic. I think that it's not actually whimsy. I think it's how we live. But I would love to see what books you love. What have you read within the writerly world, or just about how to live in the world, that you would recommend to other writers? I would love to hear if there's something I haven't listed here, because I'm always looking for new books to read, even though I have maybe the largest TBR pile ever. I'm always looking to add to it. So catch me in the comments. Let me know what you think. Have you read these books? Do you like them? Do you loathe them? And what books do you have that you would recommend to other writers or just people in your life that you are looking to say, if you really want to enjoy life, if you want to get the most out of life, read this book. I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already given yourself over to your writerly passion this week, I really hope you would. And until next time, I'll see you on Writerly Wednesday. Bye, writers.